Depends on what time zone you're in. Yes, it is time for the Musty Wargamer Show with our special guest, us.
and we're live. We're live.
Yes, we are live.
So,
all right. How's everything going over in your neck of the woods up there in the Northland, eh?
It's going very well. It's starting to get cold. It feels like winter. That's just fine by me. I actually like winter, and so I'm kind of a little rare in that respect. But
yeah, was it yesterday? I was out doing one of my many walks. I do. You know, it's like I walk twice a day. And I like to probably do 5+ miles at a time. And it's like, I got to check. How many steps did I get in today? 31,290 steps today. So I got a few today. I've been losing around. But I was out walking. It's like the temperature is like, it's 55 degrees. I was like, maybe a sweatshirt. I might take my jacket. Just for the heck of it, I'll throw my jacket. You know, I don't have to zip it up. And about halfway through, I was like, it's starting to get cold. The clouds rolled in. And then it's like, wow, that wind's getting kind of bitey. And next thing you know, it's like I'm zipped up, got my stocking cap on. And I get back to the house and it's 43 degrees. The temperature in the time of a little over an hour, it dropped to 11 degrees.
And that would be Fahrenheit, because Celsius 43 would actually be quite warm.
Yes, Fahrenheit, yeah. So just like this morning, we had 19 degrees. I think it was 19 degrees Fahrenheit this morning, which is like negative something Celsius. So, so yeah, it was a little chilly. Winter has finally showed its ugly head without the snow. So
yeah, well, I'm sure you'll be getting it. We've gotten it already. I'm sure there'll be some interesting storm systems like last year.
Yeah, it's like everything's been going to the north of us. It's like the northern part of the state's always been getting snow. It was like I had a friend of mine. I don't know if Smitty's going to be in here tonight. He lives up in the northern part of the state, and he was doing a live stream when I was doing my walk, and it was like, "It's snowing? Why is it snowing? How could it be snowing? It's 50-something degrees." Well, it's like 3 hours, 2.5 hours north of here. So yeah, I guess that would be a big difference in temperature.
So what have you been up to, and what's your musty drink? What is your?
Well, let's do the musty drink. It's an old standby. I got the extinction. Turn that there. Gosh,
they're gonna have to start paying you for this.
Yes. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Confluence Brewing Extinction Event IPA, New England style IPA, and it has that wonderful citrus bouquet. Yeah.
Looks like we got somebody in the comments too already.
Who we got?
Hello, Knight's Pantry. I don't know that I've actually noticed him on the chat yet. So hello there. Thanks for joining us.
That's Smitty.
Oh, okay. Great. We were just talking about you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I got that. That's my beer. I got to take a drink. Yummy. Loving New England style IPA is the best invention for an IPA I've ever found. Okay, now what I finished up here, I did the video, I think it was yesterday. I got my little drone.
Oh, yes. Very nice.
My Voltrex drone. So I got that all put together, painted up, and I got the little decorative base and everything on there. I got really ingenious this time. It's like normally I try to glue those things on, and sometimes they snap off. But I made the little Scopy putty thing so I can stick it in there and get it done. And today I was doing a little bit of work. It's like I have a couple things going on, but working on some of the stuff I have in there.
Have you had any games recently?
No. The group that I'm with, they're playing D&D right now. So and they moved it to Sundays, and Sundays is church day. So hey,
yeah, just didn't work out.
Yeah, it doesn't work out.
Just as an aside, normally, like from the last show, we were able to chat on the side in StreamYard while people are chatting. And it looks to me like I can only see his comments while we're in StreamYard for Knight's Pantry. I can't actually respond unless I go over to YouTube. Do you have that effect, or is that just me?
I don't know.
Are you able in StreamYard right now to?
I can see the comments coming in through StreamYard.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. I see your comment come in.
But you're not able to chat right there, right?
Let me see.
No, are you able to chat in the StreamYard screen?
Did if that showed up or not.
Oh, I wonder why. It did. I just wonder why. Chat with host and other guests.
Let's say if Smitty can see it.
No, I can see it. There.
You can see it. Obviously.
Oh yeah, it's both. It's in both spots. But the thing I just didn't understand.
Well, it showed up in on the live stream too.
Yeah, it's in both.
Oh, cool. All right. Okay. Before we had to go over to the YouTube chat in there, and then it would pop over in StreamYard. Mm-hmm. So maybe, hopefully,
you know what it is. I wonder if it's because you're the host that you can. Were you able to in the last show type on the right while we were doing the show?
Yeah.
Just right in StreamYard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even pretend to understand how this works. Because last time I was able to too, but for whatever reason right now I can't. The only way I can do it is if I go over to YouTube. Oh. And so I'm not sure why I can't.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's strange. Okay. All right. So you will need to make sure you're up on the chat if you're the host then.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. It's like flip-flop back and forth just to see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Just see if stuff does pop in here every once in a while. And right now it looks like we only have one watching. So we got one person. That's Scott. So.
All right.
And he says he's working on a piece right now. He does jewelry on the side. So he's probably heating up some silver right now to make one of his pieces. So
cool.
Or he's actually cleaning it, one or the other. Mm-hmm. I think he poured one tonight or this afternoon or something, so he may be polishing stuff. I don't know.
Well, I'm about to pour one right now. This is so I'm having Big Rock Brewery Grasshopper. I've had this one on the show before too. This is I wouldn't say I drink this nearly as much as you drink that one there. It's not like Coors Light, which I do drink a lot of as my house beer. But this is one by Big Rock Brewery that's a local Calgary brewery that I do really like. It's a wheat ale, and it's a really nice, easy drinking beer. Like this one I would say is light on the percentage, which it's 5%, which is light here in Canada. I mean, it's fairly low. And so not poking fun at you there. But
well, it was one time that Iowa had a maximum limit of 3% that you could have alcohol. We were very Puritan at one time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a Quebec brewery out here that actually makes 12%, and I think it's at least there's definitely a 12%. There might even be more. I'm not sure though, but I know for sure 12%, really high. I'll be quite honest with you. I've said it before. I'm not big on too high of an alcohol content in beer. Like when you get like over 8%, to me, it doesn't add any to the flavor of it. Like when I'm drinking a beer.
Well. It depends on the style. If you're making a barley wine, then really high. I've made stuff that's German style ales that are similar to like a Kolsch or something, or like 30 IBUs typically. So it's not really bitter, but I made them like 10-12%. Yeah. And I made them so they're not, you don't really taste the alcohol. It comes up and hits you in the backside after you had one or two of them. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I prefer to make them. It's like too many of them, they make them, you have to have them so sweet. And I was like, if I'm going to drink something sweet, you might as well drink soda, and I don't drink soda. So pretty much how I think about that.
you said Scott, right? You said Smitty and Scott when you referred to Knight's Pantry.
Yes.
What's your take on Hefeweizens? He says.
Hefeweizens. I love Hefeweizens. One of the last ales that I made, because I brew my own beer too, is made a Hefeweizen.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about have a wheat, get a wheat ale over there, and it's like that's one of the main ingredients of the Hefeweizen is wheat. So
yeah, because it's sort of a lighter, easier drinking kind of wheat ale. The Hefeweizens, they're Belgian, right?
No, the German. Belgian.
German. Okay.
Hefeweizens are predominantly, well, that's just the German name for a wheat beer is Hefeweizen.
Okay, gotcha.
And it is wheat with the yeast of a Hefeweizen gives you the spice, more of the spiciness to it.
Okay.
Now you take a Belgian ale, which uses the wheat. It's like, let's say Blue Moon's a good example.
I like Blue Moon.
That's a Belgian ale. That's a wheat ale, but they don't use as much of the yeast to go forward into giving more of that banana flavors to it. Mm-hmm. So they put like orange, peel and stuff like that.
I love Blue Moon though. It's such a smooth. It's really nice drink.
There's some in my fridge right now. So.
It's a good one.
I call that one of my lawnmower beers. So
that's nice. It's a nice one. So I'm not going to show my bestigors, which I've been working on today a little bit too. I just put a video up of them. They're actually getting towards the end. I still have to do a little bit more highlighting, a little bit more detail, but they're really starting to come together. I'm actually kind of looking forward to finishing them and seeing how they come out. I did do something that I'm going to show, but it's not a full 3D print, but I actually have an interesting little building that I'd started last week. And this particular 3D print requires a fair bit of cleanup. Actually, and while I say that, I got to plug in this camera here. There we go. It actually, okay, you should be able to see it there.
So is this a fantasy building?
Yeah, it is. This one here has a little bit more detail on the sides than the one I did before, that I showed before. I happen to like the other building design in some ways better, in the way that it requires a little less cleanup, and there were aspects to it that I really like. That was this one that I showed. But even though you see like some cracks, like, in the exterior, like in the stucco, and there's some detail, this one here has tremendous amount of detail. It's a smaller building, much more detail than the other one. And even the interior actually has quite a bit of detail.
Pretty thick wall too.
Yeah, the walls are kind of thick. Really beautiful design. And actually this designer has some extensions and things you can make larger buildings with this sort of design. The only thing about it is I could spend hours pulling pieces of plastic out of this here. And so I've got some cleanup to do for sure on it. And that's why, because when I finished printing this and I saw the amount of cleanup I needed to do, I actually halted my plan of doing the roof, and just because I've been wanting to do more painting. And that's kind of the stuff things that I've been talking about with 3D printing, that, people think it's a set it and forget it. You don't have to do anything. You get something like this, and there's like a fair bit of work to even get to the point of painting it. Like all of that stuff there is not the quality.
It's a lot of cobwebs hanging from it.
Yeah, it's just stuff I got to do to get it to where I want to get to. It'll look nice when I'm done.
I wonder if imagine somebody has, but get some with vines growing on them and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, like there are all kinds of designs that people have, for sure. But yeah, like this is actually something that I kind of worked on last week. It took a while to print too, but it'll be a nice little building for Warhammer Fantasy. I'm going to switch cameras here again. And I think I posted up on the page for Musty Wargamers that I had two little games of 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy. We did the warbands rules, and so we just literally had 2 little warbands, and I went up against more like traditional chaos, like where I was Beastman, and it was interesting. I mean, to kind of work through the rules. I don't know that lists were perfect against each other. I actually had quite a bit of trouble, but I'm still kind of learning just how. I'm not like a Warhammer Fantasy player going back. I mean, I'm playing a lot of this old stuff and going back and playing it, but I've never played it before, so it's kind of interesting. I was more of a 40K player, and so so it's fun though. I've actually kind of enjoyed it, and I've already was kind of thinking about when you go down to 100 and like less than 200 points, there's also a lot of strategy and how I've found with every game I've played, when you have a game that it normally operates in a point level of, let's say, 1,000 to 2,000, when you get to below 500, there's a huge strategy and what you bring to the table. The game may scale, and that's fine, but at the same time, what you can bring changes dramatically from a battle book, like at that level. And so it's kind of a bit different too. So I think there's a learning component in learning the game and playing. There's a component of even just bringing the lists. But I kind of enjoyed it. And actually, my buddy that I played it with kind of enjoyed it too. He found, he liked the fact that morale in 6th edition really seemed to play a big role. And there's a lot of running away at times. And it just makes the game go a bit faster. Like, in the sense of like, if people aren't doing well, they tend to run and stuff like that, which, it's funny because I'm watching a lot of sharp practice videos right now too. And that's one of the big things in sharp practice is actually keeping your guys in the fight as a leader, like that they tend to run like when things go bad. And so it's interesting to see how even in the Warhammer Fantasy that's actually, quite a big factor in our experience so far.
Yeah, it's like when I was playing fantasy on a regular basis, there is a big learning curve, just learning the basics of Warhammer Fantasy. Mm-hmm. And it just starts going from there when you got start adding in and more of the army. We typically would start off, when we used to play, was like you'd have a 500-point game. And that would be your basics to teach people play. I think we did like 3 or 4 games of 500 points, and we'd add another, and then just like, okay, giving people time. It's like a slow grow league type thing, where it's all right, you got 500 points, and then you pick up more stuff to add to your army to paint, and then it's like work on another 500 points while we're playing these, and then next thing you know, we're playing 1,000-point game, and then next thing you know, it's a 1,500-point game, and then with the 2,000 and 2,500s typically, where we ended up is 2,500-point games. And then if somebody was new come in, it's like, oh, we'll go back and bring them in and play some 500-point games and teach them how to play. And it's like when you're talking about it, it's like, man, it's like I haven't played a fantasy game like that in, it's been 4 years now since Fantasy bit to dust, I think it is. So it's like I've totally flushed. It's like you think about games systems, you're like, well, I'm no longer playing that. It's kind of like take that little chip out and put it off to the side. I'd have to really look at the rules again, read it, figure out how to play it again.
It might even almost be a bit like a new game if you go back to an older edition too. It just depends on what you do. This is actually almost like doing the mass battle game small on steroids, in the sense that the Warband supplement came out in White Dwarf, and it's not really like Warhammer Skirmish or Mordheim. It's not really a skirmish game. You're still using the mass battle rules, and they have a couple of little tweaks like to make sure that you can still use the mass battle rules for this. But really what it's meant to simulate is a detachment from your army goes off to accomplish a task. And so like the scenarios are meant to be either truly like a champion or a lieutenant or something, like, from one of your blocks, or a small hero, like takes some of the men from the army and goes off to accomplish some sort of task, and then meets the enemy of like a similar scale. And it allows you to apply the rules as you say, learn the rules like for the bigger game, even though you're playing a smaller. But then it's kind of interesting. Like I think it's kind of fun. Like I think I could see myself even after playing the big games potentially coming back and playing the Warband sort of rules once in a while, because it's just fun to think about how you would do a small detachment, even with those rules, and in some ways. I'm clearly not an expert on this because I've already said that I've not played the Warhammer Fantasy in the past, but judging from other games, I oftentimes liked playing the 500 point version within Warhammer 40K. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was called
Kill Team.
Well, no, there was another one, at least in 6th edition. It was like a reconnaissance kind of name. It was another name they used other than Kill Team. That you played at like 500 points. And I quite enjoyed that. And I think part of it is it's the same principles around Kill Team in the sense that you force yourself to make some pretty strategic choices when building your list. And then everything that normally might be considered medium powered or even low powered, all of a sudden is just that much more powerful, like in that sort of scenario. So when I was talking about Kill Team, my example was in Eldar, your Warwalker in Kill Team, when you used it in, you could use a Warwalker in the Heralds of Ruin version of Kill Team that I used to play. And it was like walking around with, like not quite a Titan, but it would be like walking around with one of your knights, Like that's how powerful it seemed, because a Warwalker, if it kicks infantry, it can kick it as pretty powerful. And then even its guns are really powerful. When you're in an infantry-based game, it's like stomping around and it's something to be feared. And so I kind of like that. I like how all of a sudden, you just view things a little bit differently, because you're playing a different point level. It's kind of changes the game a little bit.
Yeah, it's like when we were playing it's like going back to you're building your fantasy army and you're starting to play it out. One thing I would suggest doing before you get too far deep in the weeds is prevent what we call the hero hammer effect. Is that you start throwing more and more points into these hero types and generals and like that, and basically they become the army.
Yeah. And well, you might not remember this particular edition, but one of the things that I'm told is that 6th edition, like there was a lot of Hero Hammer in 5th edition, I was told, and then 6th edition tried to bring it back and make it much more infantry based and unit based. And so, but that's like a complaint that a lot of people have had that I've heard, like within Warhammer Fantasy, is that whole making it so like heroes can just wipe out, whole units really easily and things like that.
Yeah, it's like when I first started playing Fantasy, I think it was 3rd edition was when I first started playing. And it was basically, even then it was Hero Hammer. It was like you'd have your army and you have your hero, your generals, and or your general and a few heroes, and then the rest of your army is the garnish that just was there to placeholders while your heroes go out and slaughter your opponents, basically. And I always liked it when they went back, like you said, maybe it was 6th edition where they went to in 7th where they went and had more emphasis on the armies. Yeah,
and I think it's one of the reasons why many people are drawn to 6th edition. I mean, like everybody has their favorite edition, but it's one of the reasons. So yeah, and it's funny because now that I've gotten some stuff painted and we're playing 6th edition, on the hobbing side, I'm kind of switching gears and I'm going back to historical now, just to kind of spend some time. And I think the next good 2 months, possibly even 3, I'm going to be doing French Indian War, at least I would say. I've got some plans to really get a lot done. And then I'll have plenty of fantasy to come back to after that.
Yeah, it's like after, for me, delving hard into all the, doing a whole month of sci-fi stuff. It's like either BattleTech or working on my Eldar. It's like, now I just did that one piece that was pretty much the extent of my sci-fi. Sitting on the table right now, we have the, my Hessians. I've been working on. And it's like I had the box, I had the ones that were unbuilt yet, opened up the box today, and I was like, do I build the Fusiliers today, or do I continue working on these other guys? It's like looking at it, which I guess we're just moving into our topic, of one of our topics.
I was going to say, this is actually smoothly transitioning. Right now. The hobby topic.
Yeah, our hobby topic of, which is, how many projects are good to have on the table at one time. And for me, I always like to have at least two hobbies or two items going at one time. Mm-hmm. Is that, it's like if you're painting something, it's like I'm either could be building something, which is not really my favorite thing to do, or I could be painting something. But eventually, if you paint everything, you have to build something. So, and even if you have everything built, it's always good to have something different. I think at least two things going on on the table. That's like what you always said. When are you going to paint those pirates? It's like with my blood and plunder. Well, they're worked on. They're just like, I'm tired of working it up. Grab one of these guys. I'll work on them a little bit. And it's always something. It's like it's a distraction. It's like you get tired. It's like, how many times can I paint the same thing before I want to go do something different? And it's always, I don't know about you, but I always like to have at least two things sitting on my table at one time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. A lot of this for me is how you define things. Like in what do you define as that you have it in process? Is sitting on your table mean it's in process? Because if I told you that I only work on one thing at a time, but then actually I kind of made my camera span around this table, you would actually see that I've got all these 3D printing things where some of them are primed, like some of them are assembled. I've got bags of World of Twilight, which is my
vampires.
That's right. That's my little fantasy world project that I've put aside for like a really long period of time. I've never took it off my table because it's something that when I do want to maybe do something other than historical or fantasy, just do a little thing that I'm doing on the side, it's going to probably be that. But I have little things that I have some epic aircraft that are extra fighters for Epic for my Space Marines that I have to do at one point. They're just sitting there. They're not even primed or assembled. And so are those in process? I would say no. They could be there for another 2 years depending on how I decide to do stuff, and in which case I probably should remove them and put them somewhere else. But I go back and forth on this. I used to, and some of it, we all have time to do things. It's really what we want to choose to do. And with the way I've chosen to do my hobby time, I actually tend to just do start and complete these days. Like I don't paint as fast as you do. Like I mean, like I'm not painting as much as you are for sure. At the same time, I find that for me to stop a painting project is almost an excuse to just kind of not finish it. Like I get to that certain point where you need to push on, you know what I mean? And then I don't finish it. And so for me, I have to kind of complete it in some ways in my head. Now, I may at that point switch to a different genre because I'm just tired of it, and I may just switch to a different genre. But these days, I used to do it, and I may in the future again, because like I said, I kind of go back and forth. But I used to do it as you're sort of describing, where I would just kind of, when I get a little tired, I just kind of jump to something else. But I find in the end, I take longer to get back to that original project if I've stopped, and it's not a good note that I've left on. Like I prefer to do something to remain inspired. What I find a big thing for me is to always try to see the value in why I initially set out to do it. I've got stuff, how we always are buying stuff, and oftentimes we're always buying stuff and then once we've bought it, it could sit on the shelf for years, and we feel like, like now that I have it, it's not as exciting anymore, apparently. I don't need to, I can leave it there for 2 years. Well, I always try consciously to make sure that I'm understanding why I originally either invested in this or why I started painting it. And so for my Beastmen, it's been kind of easy because I'm wanting to play the games, like both Saga Fantasy and the other one. And so I tell myself, like, I this is why I'm doing it. For French Indian War, I'm excited to go back because I want to do this short practice. But at times we all can get, I understand, at times we can all hit a wall, like on a project. I think it's a valid technique to do as you say and just go and do something else. But I've personally my recent thing is to just try to push through. I don't think there's a right answer. I just think I find I have to get it done. Like, I got to get it done. I got to make myself understand why I wanted to do this. And, and like, I got to get it done. And then I finish things faster that way. I find if I actually do multiple projects, and I kind of go back and forth once I start getting bored, and in the end kind of takes me longer in the end. I don't know.
Well, we're the point where sometimes you just get burned out. It's like when you're batch painting stuff and you're working on a large project for, say, because I do commission painting too. Mm-hmm. So, and you get into where you're just doing, I just finished, all that Battletech stuff. That was a large commission. Mm-hmm. And I was burned to midnight oil with all that. And it's like I went from, on this thing here, 0 to 180 and nothing flat. It's like this, like when you seen the pictures of this, when I sent them to you or put the video out, the day before, this was just a pile of nothing.
Yeah.
It was put together, primed, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was highly motivated because I got so tired. It's like when you get so tired of doing something, for me, it's like I need to find something that really motivates me that I really, really want to do.
Yeah.
Even though I love Battletech and playing the game and stuff, but when you do a commission work for some, it's not for you. You don't get to sit there and admire it and take it home with, it's like it's going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I got to do something for me. And that was it. It's like I spent, it's like the night before, it's like, all right, I got it primed. It was like just did the wash, did everything. And then the next morning I just got up like, this is mine, all mine. So, and it's like, so it's like right now, because I have my American War of Independence, I got my Hessians on the table. And it's going to get to a point where there's only so long before you get tired. It's like, oh, I'm putting all the blue on all the uniforms right here. Okay, it's like, I gotta keep. And I find myself was like, I'm looking for something else to distract me from the monotony. And that's where I pull out like a single piece item. Mm-hmm. And I have a whole bunch of single piece items sitting in the wings in boxes that I'll just, I'm going to pull this out. Put it on the table. It's like I keep looking. It's like I'm gonna go work on this thing for a while.
Yeah,
type of deal.
Well, it's interesting. Curtis, who's been on the show and does the Forge and Brush, where he does commissions. He said something similar to you, and I think it's a valid point in that. I think when you're painting stuff and if you do take projects that you're doing more just for commission and not because you're interested in them, like you don't have as much of a personal interest, that could be really tough because I struggle with stuff I'm already interested in that I just fall out of interest after doing it for a little while. But could you imagine? I mean, I can imagine actually doing something that you're not interested as much to begin with. It's like not your area, and you could just fall out of it that much faster. So he said that he's at a point now where he just kind of chooses projects to do for commission based on things he likes to do, which I think that makes a lot of sense because that could just be really difficult. One of the things I've noticed about myself, I don't really like base. If I had to choose a stage of a project that's my least favorite, it's the base paint. For whatever reason, going from primer to getting that first layer of base paint is the least inspiring portion of the project for me. What I really like is doing the highlighting and the washes and like wet blending and I like that kind of stuff. Like I like bringing it to life, that extra step. And so when I have a big group of miniatures, which for me, that's 20 plus, or something like that. When I have like that many miniatures in front of me, could be 40, like when I was doing my French Indian War, last unit. The base paint portion where I've gotten all of the miniatures to have like 80% of the base paint, because sometimes with the way I do things, I do straps even after I do some highlighting and some blending. Like I prefer to do some straps and some of the webbing, like some certain things even in later stages, but 80 to 90% of the base painting, when I'm at that point, I can start to kind of hit that wall before I hit the things I love the most. And so what I'm finding right now with my Beastmen is like I'm kind of really getting into them now. Like this is like my favorite time where I'm actually starting to do some of the final stages of the highlighting, some of the final details, starting to do the eyes. Like I'm starting to do stuff that's really making them kind of come to life for me. And it's my favorite part. But if I allow myself before this stage to move to another project and I'm still in that stage before it, for me, it makes me put the brakes on before I've gotten to the favorite part of the project, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like you're putting the brakes on just before you get to the good juicy parts of what you enjoy.
Only because I enjoy those stages. Like I enjoy these kind of last couple of stages the most. And so that's why I'm kind of just making sure I finish it, and then I'll kind of go on to the next thing. But I've done that too. You know, I think you have to do whatever keeps you happy in the end. You know?
Yeah. It's every individual's different in a certain way. It's like, but we're human in nature. It's like across the whole spectrum of the entire hobby. It's like, we're not alone. There's thousands of us just like us that think the same way and do it the same way.
Yeah.
And you just have a hard time. Sometimes it's like you always get these individuals like, what do you guys do to motivate yourself? Well, you know, is like when you're working on something, it's like the motivation is like, okay, what really motivates you is like, all right, you're working on this. It's like right now you're working on your Beastman because you're playing with the Beastman. It's like that is a goal for you, and that, you know, that's going to be part of your motivation to wanting to get them done. Because you want to see them on the table, you want to use them on a table. And for me, that's the same thing. It's like if I know I've got a game coming up, or I'm gonna, it's like have to. It's like I'm highly motivated to put as much time and effort into getting them done. So it's like, look what I got, you know, new unit. It's like, oh, you never seen these guys before. Like, so that is one of the things. But sometimes when you're really working hard on something, I get to the point where it's like, I don't know if you're like me, but after about 4 hours of painting something solid, it's like a certain, like you're working on a certain color or just on a certain miniature. Sometimes it's like, I realize I'm getting to the point where the returns are not coming out the way you want them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I need to put this off to the side for a little while. It may be 3-4 hours or 2 hours or an hour or something. And I'll go pick something up. I'm just going to do some, put some base coats on this stuff, dry brush or whatever. And it's like, totally different what I'm doing. So my eyes can focus on something different, get the brain working differently.
Yeah.
And then it's like clean the cobwebs up because you just get so focused on, and then it's like, if you focus on something for so long, you start going off into the weeds type of thing.
And I kind of did just what you said today. Like what I ended up doing, rather than painting a different project, I literally painted for, I'm going to say 2 hours, which is about max for me these days. It's not that I can't paint 4 hours, but I just find these days I tend to paint more regularly. I paint an hour a day. And then if I can, I'll paint 2 hours. But it's pretty rare these days that I paint for 4 hours straight. When I do like it, but getting that opportunity, but it's pretty rare that I do. But today I painted for a couple of hours, and then just like you said, I just kind of gave my brain a little bit of a rest and the concentration, looking through the visor and stuff. And I just pulled this out and I started just picking plastic, you know, out between the bricks and just kind of working on this, you know. And I got more done today just in some of this stuff than I had in a while. I almost kind of set this aside for a week without doing anything to it. And then today, after painting for a couple hours, I just sort of sat there and kind of almost what's the way I kind of let the engine sort of go down, and it's
throttle down and not.
I throttled down. That's what I was looking for. I throttled down, and just kind of worked on this a little bit as I was just sitting there. And yeah, I think that's helpful. I do sometimes prime, or prepare the next group of models. And I don't really count that as working on two projects at the same time, even though it is. But I will sometimes, when I'm at a certain stage of one project I'm painting, particularly towards the end, grab the other ones and start cleaning them up and putting them on bases, and it's sort of like the pre stages, of getting started and then eventually priming it. And I do like to do that in some respects. So
yeah, when we were doing the painting challenge, I was working on my Eldar, and off to the side, it's like you suddenly seen the BattleTech commission. Just suddenly, it's like I'm going to work on the BattleTech commission. What you didn't see is behind the scenes. Like I'll be painting. It's like, okay, I need a break. All right, I'm grab this one miniature here, clean it all up, and everything, and then I put it together. And that was like not thinking type of activity.
Yeah.
It was like giving myself a break. So it was like there's two projects going on. One where I'm highly focused on and trying to just go away right into the weeds and detail and everything. And then I was like, okay, I got this thing put together. Okay, now I can pick up some more miniatures and work for a little while. And then it's like I'm starting to my brain is starting to get a little tired. Okay, go back and hey, Clark. And then it was the same thing. It's like I'd be working on those little elementals, for like little guys, like paint. Okay, need a break. Oh, okay, I'll work on this next group of guys,
right,
type of deal. So
I do think it's important, like you were saying, everybody's personality is different. I do think it's important to do whatever it takes to motivate you, in the sense of some people may be more motivated by different things and different ways of doing things. So, like for me, it's trying to stay passionate about something I've started and trying to consciously make sure that I stay passionate about it. But then for other people, it may be, trying to get a bit of an assembly line going and like having different things on the go and always doing something different a little bit every day. Like everybody's different, I think. And so it's kind of hard to say one way is really any right way.
You got to figure out what works best for you. And it's like, for me, I'm one of those type of people where batch painting works great, where I can just get focused on and spend 2, 3, 4 hours doing the same thing repetitively. But there comes at a point where it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I do need a break. And, it's like some people call me a painting machine where I can crank out so many things, but it comes at a cost at times where you are forced to give yourself a break and move on to something different for a little while to recharge.
Yeah.
That may mean it's like when you're doing commission work, it may mean having to pick something up that's for you and give yourself the joy. It's like, I'm putting some joy back into life because I'm doing it for me. And you're in the hobby for yourself anyway,
right?
One way or the other. So, but when you're doing someone else's hobby for them, it's like, it kind of sucks the life out of it sometimes.
I can imagine. I could definitely imagine that. I think it would help if you were kind of pretty comfortable with your armies and the games you were playing, and then like you were painting stuff that you already like. Yeah. Like, I think that would help a lot.
It wasn't so mind-numbing when I was doing the BattleTech stuff, because that is something I love. It's like, oh, I like the BattleTech. I love BattleTech. And it's like I'm painting stuff. It's like, and while I'm painting, it's like, maybe I should get some of these for myself sometime. And it's like, do I make my saving throw or not?
Yeah.
I did. Oh, not today. The wallet stays safe. But
so if you were somebody that was into Napoleonics and like that was your thing and you did nothing but that pretty much, and you were playing black powder and like you had a black powder army that you painted and it took you, let's say, 1.5 to 2 years to paint. Maybe that's being optimistic, but if that was you, when you were finished, and if you were like, people wanted you to paint their stuff, like you were commission quality, I could see somebody like that being just fine with painting a unit of Napoleonics and then charging someone for it, because they actually enjoy painting Napoleonics. Like that's their period, and they already have their army and stuff. So not that I realize we all have figures we want to paint. Like we never run out of figures. That's just the nature of this hobby. But if you were kind of set, like right now I'm painting my Warhammer Fantasy to be able to play. Like I don't have enough to play certain point levels. But if you like had everything you needed to play your main core game, and then like you're really just painting commission for an area you like, I could see that really being doable for somebody.
Yeah, it's like you look at like Curtis, for example. You know, he's painting all those World War II. He'll do a unit. It's like he'll just do a unit, and he enjoys painting that era.
Right.
So he enjoys. It's like, oh, I'm doing this, and it's the same way. It's like if I'm painting a BattleTech or Dystopian Wars, where it's like I'm getting back into doing my historical stuff. You know, it's like I have building up is like right there behind Supergirl. Mm-hmm. Is a big stack of I don't know, maybe enlarge my screen here a little bit. You see it as a pile of underneath there's the Continentals right there.
I could see all the Warhammer, the Warlord Games boxes.
Yes, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah,
and there is a World War II Soviet army sitting right there. Mm-hmm. And it's slowly but surely, it's like I'll pull out a sprue to put some stuff together and then throw it back in the box. It's slowly being built. So the plan is that eventually we're going to do some Eastern Front stuff.
Nice.
So
we got a couple comments in here. We got Clark saying, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to stay motivated. And Coupe de Gras, which I don't think I've seen him in here before yet, but he says, Hellcrux, you rock, man. Thanks for all of the vids. So you've got a fan in here, man.
Yeah. the BattleTech house has showed up.
That's right. And so, yeah, that's awesome. And so, yeah, no, the best way to stay motivated. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, Clark, I think. I think it's everybody's a little different. But one of the things I'm trying to battle is the consumerism mentality that we all, like, even our hobby is no different than any hobby. Like, we're all looking at the new shiny, you know, we all like to buy that new thing that's coming out, and it just piles up, and we can buy so much faster than we can paint. It's a ratio that will always work against us. And so for me, the main thing is to try to really think about what, as time goes on and I play games, I really try to make sure I know which ones I enjoy, and really make sure that I continue to play every few months the games I enjoy. And then it makes it much easier for me to know which dollars I invest and the time spent too. Sometimes it's not even painting. Like, I actually really love Star Wars Armada. I've talked about that, and I love that game. And I have no problem with spending money on it, and I will always go back to it and play it. But the same thing with Saga, same thing, Musket and Tomahawks. You know, there's just certain games that I just always come back to, and then it makes it easier for me to prioritize my painting and stuff. But the hard thing is when we just buy so much more than we can paint.
Yeah, I've always said it takes 30 seconds to get yourself into trouble, because that's all the time it takes is to pull out the credit card and go. It's like, thank you, instant army, and then you go, what have I just done? But the thing about motivation is you just got to find you find a specific niche, because I know Clark, he's a BattleTech guy, and you get into, if you're playing enough games and you're playing them all the time, the motivation comes, and that's part of it is then you focusing that motivation into picking up a brush when you got the free time and start painting on something.
Yeah. But
it's like, I find it's like, well, the hardest thing about any type of project is just trying to figure out a paint scheme for sometimes. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, I have a wedding coming up, so my disposable income is accountable for, yes.
Yeah.
Like the Kickstarter is my big mini purchase of the year. I agree. That was a big chunk of change that went out to my wallet too. And the wife was like, what did you just do? It's like, didn't you just spend some money on It's like, well, yeah, there was that and Gen Con. So between Gen Con and the Kickstarters, like BattleTech took a big chunk out of my yearly budget.
Yeah. So, okay. So what was the average price of the Kickstarter?
Well, there's 150. It's like, if you really wanted something, you'd spend about 150 at least.
Okay. I'm getting ready to put my leg on the table and say, I got you beat. You know that scene from Jaws, right? I'm just kidding. For me, it was the Old Hammer High Elf Army when I just, and it wasn't just that one purchase I did, but it was also getting a couple of other things to go with it to try to expand it. But it's just, yeah, like sometimes like the Kickstarter, for the same reason why the Kickstarter sometimes makes sense. Doing some like one big purchase like that makes sense though, like because sometimes you just get so much for doing it all at once rather than trying to get it all in piecemeal later, that it actually does make sense. And for me, I'm going to do a video I think on this because people have asked to see that High Elf army I purchased. But for me, it was like, if I'm going to collect a new army, it's going to cost me more upfront to do it this way, but it's going to cost me a bit of money upfront to do it this way, but it's going to cost me a lot less in both delivery and per miniature to just do it all kind of at once up front, like as much as I can. And that's kind of the same idea with the Kickstarter too, I think, is that they give you more for your money when you actually invest up front in most Kickstarters. And it's like the same idea.
Yeah, you typically I think we were picking, was it about $5-10, I think it was, per miniature that we were picking up from the Kickstarter. Depends on how many you got. The more you picked up, the less it costs you per miniature.
Right.
For Battle Mech. And it's like, well, they got all these new plastics coming out. And I, for example, was like, well, I could buy myself a whole, invest it to say $200 into the Kickstarter and find myself with even more stuff. I love the game, so it's like, it's not like something I won't paint. And then I turned around and spent about the same amount at Gen Con picking up more. Did
you get a sweatshirt through the Kickstarter?
That will be coming, a T-shirt and all that stuff too. So.
Oh, but did you didn't you have like a sweatshirt on like for the latest release or something?
Oh, I got a BattleTech. I almost wore it tonight. I think I wore it the last time.
Yeah. Wasn't
that was the 35th anniversary sweatshirt that I picked up from Catalyst Games. So Clark said, I also assuming that investing in the Kickstarter is going to be less than buying everything once they hit store. Yeah, because once they hit the store, you're looking at about $15 a piece, probably. Yeah. So
that makes sense.
It's like, I think my nephew, he's forked out about $1,000. And he's also, maybe it's $1,500, something like that. He just say, oh, I'm not married. I live at home. I got a great job. It's like, I make $4,000 a month. Who cares? It's a couple thousand. It's like half. That's only half of my monthly income, so it's no big deal. You're like, okay, you're not married, so you don't know these things.
Most of the time, I don't do it the smart way. Like most of the time, I say I'm going to spend $70 and get a couple of boxes of these miniatures, and I'm not going to buy the $300-400 thing, But this time, I spoke to my wife about it. I was like, okay, this is what I'd like to do. But for me to do it, this is the only smart way to do it. She's like, whatever, just do it.
Yeah. Whatever.
Whatever. Like, just go ahead.
You think that's okay. You keep telling yourself that.
No, the funniest thing, and I'll go over this in the video when I talk about it, is that I think I was talking to you offline about it, and some of the lot was sight unseen. Like some of this was like buying a storage locker. I mean, like you could see only so much of it, and then there was a certain level of uncertainty. But it was like, what's underneath there, and like, oh, they've got so much there, and like, oh, there's probably something good underneath there. I'm thinking, and so, but I don't know for sure, right? And so, once I bought it, all I was doing was just talking about how I hope like the stuff I can't see is still there when they send it. And my wife's like,
you only get what was seen in the picture.
That's right. Like, but because there was stuff you couldn't see underneath it, I'm like, how do I know they're going to send the stuff that I can't see? Because I haven't seen it. And then she's like, just shut up.
You're freaking out. You're the one that you pulled the trigger. Live with the consequences.
That's pretty much what I had to tell myself. Everything worked out fine. It actually worked out more than fine. And like that, in the end, that's what I had to tell myself. But it's kind of funny. Like, I don't do well with trust.
It's like it's that buyer's remorse starts kicking in. It's like I find myself the same way. It was like, well, buy it like a new car. It's like, oh my God, what did I just do? 5 years I have to sit here and it's like pay for this thing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah. It's like, then I'm just like, after I bought it, then I have to hold this vehicle until it's 10 years old. So I get my use out of it. It's like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things. It's like the other night when they had the get 10% eBay bucks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you got the same offer come across for you.
I think I did see that. Yeah.
On Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, well, I have a couple more items I could use for my Soviet army, for my 15 mil Russians for World War II. So what did I do? Well, I bought myself some SU-8 76 for a little self-propelled gun type thing. So I bought 5 of those. So like, all right, there's a unit. Because I already got the T-34s. I already have a whole bunch of infantry, anti-tank guns, and all that stuff. Because they come in the box. It's an army box, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm looking at how do I accessorize this army so I can have a little bit more. So it's like, that's the problem. Is like, I wish, it's like, okay, then, but the only way I can get is either Plastic Soldier Company or I have to go through Battlefront, because Warlord Games is like, or not Warlord Games, but Plastic Soldier Company only has certain items and they don't have everything else that I need. So
yeah.
And then unfortunately Battlefront, their stuff's expensive, but comparatively.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, it's a bit of a slippery slope, all of that. And so, we've kind of strayed off our main topic a little bit, but as we can so easily do sometimes,
we got off into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah. Value for money with big purchases versus actually how to stay motivated to paint. But yeah, well, I think we probably have went through that one quite a bit to this point. And and I think you want me to kick off the next ones?
Yeah,
the gaming topic one. Well, I don't know that we have to focus on the non-competitive and competitive nature of this question, but it's just a component of it. But I think when it comes to randomness as part of our games, dice games have randomness to them. But some games in their design will have random events and random tables to just sort of add flavor and narrative and, just different sort of components to the game that you might not see coming that can make it fun. And so I was kind of curious what people thought about in both competitive gaming and in non-competitive casual gaming, what place random event tables and random things that come up, like how that plays into it. As far as, do you like those in your games? Do you think that they're perhaps add an aspect to it that you can't predict and is unfair? Like how do you kind of look at it? One of the reasons why I thought of this recently is I have been watching some sharp practice videos, some American War of Independence, BAT reps, French Indian War, Napoleonics, and in sharp practice they do have where it's a game where cards come out, or pieces come out, where you actually get to get these flags that you can activate your leaders and do things. And when you get enough cards, like the more cards you hold on to before the turn randomly ends, which is another random element, that the game turn itself is random. It can end at any point. And so if you hold on to these, then you take that chance that as they stack, they actually become more options open as far as extra effects that you can use these for. And so, but the problem is if you get enough of them, like 3 in a row, then all of a sudden a random event table happens and bad things can happen. And so it adds some flavor to the game. Oftentimes, like your officer can fall off his horse, like different stuff can happen. And it just adds a bit of flavor. And so I kind of thought about it. There were some comments by the gentleman that created the game about random events that I'll share later. I don't want to sway our conversation, but I think I'll bring those up later. But what do you think, Rusty? Like, how do you think it plays into the games you play? What do you feel about it?
Well, when we play with our game that we designed, because I've designed some games too, is that we built in some type of random effects too into the system. Where, let's say it was a D20 system that we had. If you rolled let's say you had to make a saving throw and you rolled a 1, that could cause a random effect, morale effect could happen on the unit because you just watched, something bad that could happen with the unit, and it's like cause terror, or it's like, oh, or you roll a natural 20 with something, and it's like, oh, you get an immediate action or something of that nature. Yeah. And if I looked at some of the sharp practice stuff too, and if you have a random effect can happen, your generals are just not sitting there. A stray cannonball, say you're playing Napoleonics, and suddenly a cannonball gets fired at a unit here, and it's like powder charge was too much and overshot the unit, and it goes boing, bouncing down the thing, and the general's all the way in the back, and all of a sudden gets taken out by a stray cannonball. That is possibility. And I kind of like the idea where events is like, let's say you roll 3 natural 20s. Oh, you just created, or 4 natural 20s, and suddenly you look at the chart and like, oh, you're moving over into this totally random thing. It's like maybe you're playing World War II. Out of nowhere comes an airstrike. It's like, here comes a typhoon and strafes your own guys. Misidentified. Just, oh, that's Germans down there. Like, oops, type of thing. And I have no problem with that. It adds maybe some flavor to, so maybe you're steamrolling your opponent, and all of a sudden a random effect. Oh, you're doing too well. And,
do you think? So even though I don't think it has to be the be all end all of the conversation, but do you think competitive play versus casual play could have an element to this?
When it comes to casual play, I don't have a problem with a lot of randomness, stuff being thrown into it, because it adds some different activities into the game, different feel. Now, if you're playing, let's say, a tournament or something like that, I say random effects probably should be put to the minimum. And it's just like, all right, this is a skill of you maneuvering your fire. It's like that kind of take the variety as much as possible out, just so it's just, however you're maneuvering stuff. So that's kind of like how I look at it that way. So if it's a totally random game where against 2 people that are playing just for the pickup game, or you just a narrative game that you're playing over at your house or at the store or something, I don't have any problem with randomness being tossed in. But I can see, I know the mentality of the tournament player types, because I've done some of that, is that they do not like anything different. It's like, this is the plan, I'm doing my plan, and then suddenly something out of nowhere happens, like, that is not supposed to happen. You're going to have some irony.
You won because of that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I absolutely love random events because I'm a casual player. I'm not a tournament player. And so I absolutely, like, some of the funniest things, like I had a game of Musket and Tomahawks within the last couple of years where we were playing, random event table happens, bear comes out of the woods and attacks one of the soldiers in a unit and kills him.
It comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, like, because Musket and Tomahawks, it's like in the woods, right? I mean, like, you're playing a lot of stuff with this heavily wooded, and so, like, guy gets killed by a wild animal, like when a unit's skirmish is going through the woods. sometimes they're spread out. They're canvassing an area they're not all bunched together, right? And so it's possible, right? I mean, it may not be likely, but it's possible. It for the amount of Musket and Tomahawk games I've played, it's only happened once. And so it's kind of funny because it's probably happened as often in my games as it's happened in real life. But at the same time, the whole pot shot of this probably happened more often as a sympathetic civilian, farmer, like in a field, takes a pot shot in the distance at a group, of the opposing side or kind of thing. Those are fun. I mean, like, I just find they're so much fun. Like, we always laugh, and that's what it's all about. Like, when we play our games, is we want to have a good time.
Get off my cabbage.
That's right. That's right. We always, and it's real, it's trying to simulate some of the humor of real life. Like, cause there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in real life. They say, fiction's, what is the expression that truth is stranger than fiction, right? And like, I think that's true to some degree. You can almost replicate that in some ways. I mean, this attempts to, but you can't almost completely replicate it. And so I have lots of fun with that. Now, I know that so the gentleman from Two Fat Lardies, when he's talking about short practice, one of the things he says, he thinks it's really good to incorporate random things, but they should never be game breaking. Like, you should never, it should never be that a random airstrike comes in and just wipes out a whole unit, or 2 units, or just does something that really eliminates the ability to be competitive in the game. Like, they feel that it should add flavor, but not make it totally imbalanced, like the random activations. Now, it's funny because I understand, like, when I talk about competitive and I bring this up, Dan Booman just joined in. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
We're talking a lot about short practice tonight. When we talk about competitive could be really a lot of things, because people play things that are competitive that could even have an agreed upon random element to the game. It's just that in wargaming, when we think of competitive nature, we think of like the list builders and like the whole trying to min-max and like do all these things to have as much control over the situation as possible. And I kind of agree, like in those environments, they don't want to lose because of something they feel they had no control over, like, and so from that perspective, I kind of understand it. Now, you could theoretically have a competitive league for sharp practice, and because of the significant amount of random elements in the game, where we were just talking about Dan Booman says he just got in from the field. We were just talking about the sympathetic farmer and Musket and Tomahawks that takes pot shots in the random event tables.
Get out of my corn.
That's right. That's an actual random event that happens in Musket and Tomahawks. But basically, you could have a sharps practice league, and these people are playing semi-competitively, like they're kind of work competitively. They're serious about it. But the rules state such that these random events happen. So when they happen, you have to adapt. It's still competitive. We're still playing to beat each other. We're still have a tournament, And so I think you can still have random tables. They just have to be, it's understood when you play a game like this, that there's that element. Now, I don't think either one of us necessarily have to defend random event tables as part of this discussion. But one of the things that I like about it too, even in a competitive environment, is that if you were playing a game of sharps, if you were thinking about the period of, let's say, French-Indian War, and you have the generals, laughing at Dan's comment that he's been known to do that. If you have like your captain, and like he's thinking, where am I going to move my men to in this topography, in this area, let's say of Pennsylvania, and I'm going to think about where I'm going to move my troops. I know the last sightings from the scouts from the French have been over that way, and so I decide I'm going to push my men up this low grade upwards, and I know that, they're going to have to hike it up this, but it's going to put us in a better position. But guess what? It rains.
That's right.
Well, once I'm committed and I'm halfway through, it starts to rain and it's muddy. That's a random event, right? Like that's life's random event. But you're playing a historical game, miniature game, and maybe you just need to figure it out at that point, right? Like you just need to, like, that's what you need to do to win. You still need to win. Like they needed to still win, like that was their goal intent. But now they've got their men going up a 1/4 mile slope. Their enemies' scouts have already know where you're at, and you're halfway through, and it's raining and it's muddy.
So powder charge, your frizzing pan's wet. It's a lake, slipping and sliding, fix bayonets. Where we go.
That's right. So I think regardless, competitive, non-competitive, like it could have a place. I do think that we tend to see it more in games that are geared towards less competition. But I think the more flavorful and the more variety that there can be, that they could be kind of fun. I think it's great sometimes when the tables have situations where nobody's impacted that much. Like you're like, oh, like random event table comes up and it's not too bad. What happened? Then sometimes like it's something significant, and then sometimes, it's something, that could even be beneficial. Like I believe in the short practice one, there's a couple of them in there that are positive, like when it comes up. So you could actually end up having a positive situation. And so the more of that, the more even fun it is. Like, if it's always really bad, kind of like at certain points within Games Workshop books, if you actually roll like double sixes or double ones on a psychic phase, like, like there's a certain chart. I remember a table where like it only gets worse. Like it starts at bad and then it only gets really bad. like there's like nothing good that practically comes from it. Those kind of tables I'm not as into, because it's pretty much, the same as saying like this guy's dead.
As the morale goes, it's like you just got into a major fight, you're falling back, you're demoralized. As you're going past the tavern, the prostitutes come out and start cheering the boys. Morale goes up, but we're still disordered.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. I would say Clark has something up here, as I would say that the hints or teasers need to be given during the beginning of the game. That is planned random events like warp. Yeah. There are some, it's like I played in some games that you roll let's say you roll a D20 on a 18, 19, or 20, a random effect, weather will affect begins type of thing. And I've gone through those where it's like, you may end up doing it's like played a Civil War game one time where it was like, they had that random effect, and it was a major thunderstorm going on. And so you got all these guys with these bayonets sticking up in the air, and it's a lightning storm going on. And it's like, no powder charge is going to work. Everything's wet. So all you do is like, it's totally melee. And it's like one of the guys, I remember one of the Confederate units got hit with a lightning strike. It's like a little company goes, like, they're gone. Like, oh, that's not so good. Take those two little stands off. Yeah. Let's see. Otherwise, random game mechanics can just add to Fog of War. Yep. Can definitely enhance, but the entire outcome should not be decided by a random event. It's like exactly with Too Fat Lardy's.
Yeah.
Skill should be able to overcome everything. That's the important thing, is that if an event happens, you have to adapt to it.
Yeah.
But it's not something that should be insurmountable. That that happened. I can't win the game now because of it.
Right.
It's like, okay, a strong wind comes up, and it's like you're over in these wooded area, and the trees come down, so it's like abatis now. So it's like it's a disordered movement. Or now you're sitting in a more of a defensive position type thing. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would agree with that, like for wargaming and pretty much for the games that I like to play. Having said that, like not so much devil's advocate, but I was listening. You mentioned D&D earlier, and I was listening to, while I was painting, somebody talking about the early editions of D&D, like the chainmail and then the first editions of D&D. Yep. And they were talking about the random monster encounter table. Mm-hmm. So like apparently, in like the earlier editions of D&D, like they had the random monster encounter table that had nothing to do with the monsters that you would normally see in your module.
Yeah.
Like, but it was a random table. And apparently the random table, even at like the first levels of the game, had a huge variety of deadliness to the monsters. Like you could literally run into a dragon at like first level, you know, and so really like you could die very easily, like, you know, within the earlier editions of D&D and the way they did that. And the question is that I think is really fitting for this discussion. Like now that I'm thinking of it, because as much as I agree that when you're playing each other and you've only got like 3 hours to play and you're trying to play a game where you're going against each other, that it shouldn't be game breaking. Like it should be add fun and flavor and maybe a little edge here and there, like something to deal with, but maybe not be game breaking. I also see how some people could say that having the possibility of something show up that could be that deadly and that you could die like at any moment by taking on this task as an adventurer with your character, that there's a certain level of tension and enjoyability to the experience for that too.
What brings up is that you're talking about that. We were playing D&D Saltmarsh, and the party was like, they had the little mansion that's up on the hill. It's like you're supposed to go in and I don't know if you ever played the Saltmarsh series before in D&D.
The Black Marsh is what I'm thinking of, not the Saltmarsh, but it's maybe a different one. Yeah.
So it's like the party is like, this is back in the 80s we were playing, and I'm DMing, and it's like, all right, they're going through, they're coming up, and all of a sudden I said, you hear the sound of horses and stuff and rattling of the wagon wheels, the squeak as it's going down the road, and it's like what do you see? What we seen is the guy. So the rogue goes up there and he sneaks up there and he's looking, he's like, he sees this eerie greenish eyes of this man behind the cow. He's in there, and it's like, it looks like almost like skeleton horses being pulled on this chariot. Not a chariot, but a carriage. And like a hearse, like carriage type thing. And it's like, so he goes back and tells the party what's going on. And it's like, okay. It was like, well, what are you going to do? And the guy, one of my cousin, Ray, who's the, I don't know if Smitty's in here or not, but my cousin Ray, he was a barbarian player. He's like, let's get him. So he runs out into the road and he's like, character charges out there. And we're like 3rd level or something at the time. And he charges over and all of a sudden he goes, with this big 2-handed battle axe. And all of a sudden he's like, kills him. It was like a 12th level necromancer. Yeah. It was like way out of your league at that time. Kills him on the spot and raised him. So I got raised him. And he uses his old character like, hey, what's going on? It's like, you're dead. You're a zombie now. Now you're attacking the party. So now we have to hack you up.
But that adds a certain level of like planning, tension, and enjoyment when those things can happen. Like it's possible for them to happen. Like if you're, let's say it's like a Lord of the Rings sort of mentality, but if you're like simulating, like, you know, you're a party in Middle Earth, and if you're like that group of hobbits, and if there's no chance you'll ever run into the 3 trolls, or let's say the Hobbit, the movie, if you're Bilbo and like there's no chance you'll ever run into the 3 trolls, or that they'll never be able to do anything to you, then it kind of makes the story not as good, right? Yeah. You know, having said that, some people would say like we played for an hour and then like half of us died, and like then we just kind of were done for the evening, and that wasn't fun. Like, so I guess it just depends on how you go about it, I guess.
I always looked at random events like that is an option. It's like when I was DMing, it's like I give them the option. It's like you hear something, you get, what are you going to do? It's like, I give them the option. I go charging forth, and he's like, send somebody out and check this out. And then they give them the whole full description of what they see, and then they can go make a decision about what they want to do. Now you get those impulsive types that is like, full speed ahead type and damn the torpedoes types. Yeah. And I was like, okay, you asked for it, here it comes. And it's like you can get it possibly into some of the like the big war games and stuff. Is that there could be an event where, like I said earlier, where an airstrike comes in. It's like you have the options, like you hear the roar of aircraft coming in, like, what are you going to do? Are your troops going to hit the dirt, or are they going to start shooting back and look like they're or you're gonna like, hey, we're the good guys type of thing. Start waving the flag and wave them off. So that might be some, like if you got a game where you have a game master going on, it's like controlling the events. It's like, see what they do, and then go from there. And it's like, don't spank them for. It's like if they do something stupid like shooting back, oh, obviously you're hostile. Here comes a couple 500-pound bombs type of thing. But
and that's the thing is if you have these kind of random events that have the ability to kill you in the game or have like some serious threat, and it may not even always be like a black dragon or a necromancer. Sometimes it could be just about their trolls, anybody that's played D&D knows that even in earlier levels, like trolls are nothing to mess with. They might be something you can kill, but you don't want to just take them lightly. But like if you have that let's get him scenario you talked about, the first time the barbarian says let's get him, and then after like he dies by the necromancer, the next time it's like let's get him, and then the time after that it's like should we get him, guys? Because after the third time of dying, it's sort of like it forces you to really think whether you should run right in.
Yeah, it's like you sit there going, did you learn your lesson the first time? Or are you going to actually do some smart things this time? It's like, it's not necessarily in your best interest to always go kill, kill, kill. Like, kill all. The only way we win, loot.
That's right. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think like D&D isn't really, in my mind, at least, like a competitive mindset game. Like you're not, like it's more narrative and group play. And like,
it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be narrative, and then the characters, the people playing the game, run the narrative. Yeah, like it's like as a DM, it's like I create the story, but you are running the narrative. It's like you decide what's happening within it, and I'm going to react to what you guys do. And it's like always get the option. It's like always give them an option. Yeah, but if you do something stupid, be prepared to be spanked.
Yeah, and it's funny though. Like steering it back towards our tabletop discussion. Some of the games that I play are really fairly non-random event based. Like Saga, although it has a lot of flavor in other ways, like doesn't really have like a random event table at all. Like you don't run into that at all. Whereas Musket Tomahawk, made by the same company, actually has a lot of flavor of those kind of random elements. Games like the X-Wing Armada games, there's a little bit of randomness in the damage cards. Like when you grab a damage card and there's some like different possibilities that happen to your ship. Like literally, like you could have, certain systems malfunction. You could have like, certain problems with your pilot and like different things that happen that cause your ship to perform differently. I think that adds and that's actually a highly competitive game. Yeah. But I think it's fully accepted. I mean, like that. You have these damage cards and you really never know what's going to happen. If you get a face-up damage card, like randomly you get hit with something that really could affect your ship differently. So I think it can work. Like, I think that's an example where, it can work.
That's where something's going to happen, and be prepared for it to happen to you type deal. And so you just have to adapt to it. And then it's not overly a bad issue per se, right? In most cases, and it's like as Clark said, it's all about the group and what they want. Yeah, it's like for D&D, it's like they, like I said, they control the narrative. It's like, what are you gonna do? But when it comes to on tabletop games, if you're playing a scenario, and then if you got random effects could happen if these things are triggered. Yeah. So it's like, you look at it, it's like, all right, if so many units of yours are broke or something, some effect is going to get triggered. If you cross this line right here, there might be a random effect being triggered on a roll of this. It's like you have to have the trigger points built into the scenario type of thing. Right, right. And then it's like in your Musket and Tomahawks, the grizzly bear coming out of the woods, suddenly just like, oh, there goes his face. He's No more skirmisher, he dead.
That's right. But I'll tell you, like, we've had the most fun sometimes with those. I mean, it's kind of like we're both figuring out how to kill each other in the game. Like, we're both trying to achieve our goals. But when something like that happens, like, generally, even the thing that happens, even when the bad thing happens to the person, they tend to laugh. Like, because it's just so unexpected and it's just not happening to you in real life.
Yeah.
And you just tend to kind of laugh.
Yeah, Dan says here, bolt action has the foobar rule as well as the randomness of airstrikes and adds a lot of flavor, but is usually not a game changer. Yeah, it's like we were playing battle group game, and it's like when you do so much damage or something to a unit, you got to pull a chit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get a unit that's pinned. You got so many units are pinned, so you can't activate anybody. It's like, oh, you're locked down. And that's a game where pinning people down is better than just killing them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're forcing them. It's like, oh, I gotta pull a chit to see how many guys I can get back into action. So you pull a chit out and you go, oh, airstrike. All right. So it's my favor. So I can go do an airstrike at my opponent on somebody and drop a couple 500-pound bombs on somebody's head. So that's a random effect because something bad happened to you, something good could happen, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a great example of randomness thrown into the game for your own benefit. So
yeah, exactly. No, that is good. Things that sort of self-balance the game a bit too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, no, it's interesting topic. I think we had a lot of discussion offline, and in our video last time, and also offline on pre-measuring. But I think even randomness and how much people like could be a contentious topic. Some people might like that in their game, and some people might like more control over the situation in their games. It really just depends.
Yeah, it's like, who doesn't like pre-measuring?
I love pre-measuring. Did I say anything different?
Now, if it's a sci-fi game, I have no problem with it. So with fantasy games, like you're getting yourself into fantasy.
Yeah.
And part of it is that you got to estimate and stuff. So that's one of the aspects of the game, depending on what type of unit. So
yeah.
There's randomness involved.
That's right. All right. Well, interesting topics tonight.
I got a question for Dan if he's listening real quick. You said you just got out of the field. It's like, was it beans or corn? It's probably corn by now, but I imagine the beans are done by now. So if you can answer that one, if you got how many more acres he still has to pull in, if he's listening.
This is an interesting technique of interaction with the audience, if I've seen one.
That's the audience question.
I thought I'd seen everything by this point.
It's Iowa, right? It's like farming is part of our blood around here.
So, Dan, when you're referring to livestock, are you talking about pigs or cows today? Or you say
working on corn? There we go.
Okay.
He's harvesting corn.
All right.
That's what I figured. It's like most people have their beans out, or probably have their beans out by now.
Okay.
About 6 days of corn, where after the beans are done. Yeah. It's like one of those things with the corn. It's like we have had some really crappy weather to dry that stuff out enough to harvest it, and we got some really dry days right now, so that's probably why. And you're going, I don't understand.
I was thinking corn, Nurgle, Slaanesh, beans, corn.
Children of the corn.
There you go. Awesome. All right. Well, I certainly appreciate everybody that stopped by for our discussion tonight.
Yep. And with corn, you make bourbon.
This is true.
Which is part of our musty drink. So
bring it
full circle.
Wheat is our rye.
Yep.
So one thing I just wanted to mention is everybody just be aware that we do have the Facebook group. We've mentioned it before. And so we do put up projects and things that we're working on, and as well as people in both the show's audience, as well as people that are just on Facebook, put projects that are going on the Facebook page, the Musty Wargamers, just like the show. So be sure to check that out if you like. And Dan says the corn is still wet, but needs to come in. Okay.
Yep. You got to put it in the bins and start drying it. It's the cost of corn whiskey. Yeah.
And Rusty's going to be doing, just following this show, an agricultural live stream. And so, yeah, so thanks for everybody joining. I will likely be doing another show in 2 weeks, right, Rusty?
Yep. It'll be over in your channel on the 21st, I believe.
Yeah, just 2 weeks from tonight is most likely what it's going to be. We'll put up a notice just like usual.
And right now we don't have a guest yet, but if you want to be a guest, all you have to do is drop us a line one way or the other. Drop it in the comments or something and say, hey, you want to join us on a show or something? We can get in contact with you. Very
quick psychological assessment offline before, but very easy. So,
yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
We'll put you through the 20-step psychological test to see if you're no.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. We'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.